Morning light spilled across the marble lobby like poured milk, soft and bright and a little too clean for real life. Elevators sighed open and shut with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Heels clicked, voices braided into a hum that belonged to money and schedules. Near the reception desk, a little girl in a pale dress stood on tiptoe and pressed her forehead to the cool edge of the counter, fogging the glass with a butterfly breath. Her name was Lucy. She wore white sneakers with one untied lace, a band-aid, with stars on one knee and a serious expression that did not match her years. "Stay where Mr. Harold can see you," her mother said, crouching to eye level. Olivia's voice was gentle but tight, the kind of tight that comes from weeks of pretending deadlines are not also lifelines. She smoothed a stray curl from Lucy's forehead and kissed it. 15 minutes, 20 at most. Mr. Harold, the security guard with a blue blazer and the kind of face that has watched everything and judged no one, lifted a hand in a slow wave. "I've got her, Liv. Go on." Lucy nodded like a soldier. "I'll be right here." She meant it. She meant it the way children mean everything. Absolutely. Until Wonder walks by. Wonder took the shape of a tall, quiet man moving a mop along a strip of sunlit tiles at the far end of the hall. He worked as if the floor were a sleeping animal and he did not want to wake it. His shirt was the building's gray, his gloves thin, his hair tied back at the nape. There was nothing remarkable to name at first glance, and yet Lucy's feet migrated, step by small step, toward the glow where dust turned to glitter. The janitor paused to steady a wobbling cart. A woman dropped a stack of printouts, and before the paper had finished fluttering, he was there, collecting them with a steady, unhurried grace, handing the stack back with the smallest nod. A custodian older than he was struggled with the weight of a trash bin. He took it in both hands, lifted, waited until she caught her breath, and returned it as if he were passing a candle. Lucy simply watched. In the mirror shine of the floor, she could see his reflection and her own, small and bright behind him like a trailing star. She didn't know his name. She only knew the shape of him and the feeling that settled in her chest, as she watched him do quiet kindness without asking anyone to look. Her journal at home was full of drawings, stick figures with smiles too big for their faces, a table full of pancakes on Saturdays, a pair of long arms that lifted her to reach the moon sticker on her ceiling, a man who laughed softly, who saved his best stories for bedtime, who called her sunshine and meant it. The storybook father. Not the one whose absence sat like dust on the shelf, unmentioned, uncleaned, simply there. A different one. She had never looked at the men in lobbies and seen her drawings out loud. Until now. She edged closer. The janitor dipped the mop and pulled it back in a ribbon straight as a horizon. When he turned, their eyes met. His a brown so deep it was almost black, hers the color of green glass. The words arrived in her mouth as easily as a breath. "Are you my new daddy?" Time snagged on a nail. The mop stopped where it was. An elevator dinged and went on dinging without anyone noticing. The janitor's gaze didn't flee or soften or laugh. He stood for one beat, then another, then set the handle against the wall and lowered himself to her height, joint by careful joint, until his eyes were level with hers. He didn't answer. Perhaps he couldn't. His mouth opened and closed, the shape of a word forming and dissolving like a wave breaking in place. A white half-moon of scar curved along his throat, just above the collar, a pale, quiet line that said nothing and too much. His hands, clean, careful hands, rested on his knees. He looked at her without flinching, as if looking itself could hold a child safely. Lucy felt no embarrassment. She felt the way you feel when you've guessed a riddle before the room, a fizz in the blood, a rightness. "You don't have to be," she added, whispering as if they were in church. "I just thought maybe." From the desk, Mr. Harold's voice traveled like a rope thrown gently across water. "Princess? Don't go out of my sight now." Lucy rocked back on her heels. "I have to go," she told the janitor, apology grave in her tone, as if she were canceling a meeting. "I'll see you later." She took 3 steps away, then spun back and said, earnest, "You look like someone who knows how to make pancakes." Then she scampered toward Harold, shoes squeaking, as though nothing enormous had happened. The janitor remained kneeling for a moment after she'd gone. He lifted a hand to his throat, thumb following the white crescent there, as if it were a rosary he'd forgotten. Whatever lived behind his ribs pressed forward, a soft-fisted ache asking to be counted. He stood slowly. He took a breath that wasn't quite a sigh and reached into the pocket of his work trousers for a small, dog-eared notebook. With a stub of pencil, he wrote on a square of paper, letters careful as stitches. "I don't know if I'm your new daddy, but I hope your mommy smiles today." He folded the note once, twice, slid it into the front pocket of his cart, and went back to moving light across stone. On the 43rd floor, a glass door whispered the name of the man who owned the building with the confidence of a sermon, Richard Whitmore. The name traveled in halls. It sat on the edge of conversations. He was the kind of man whose suits were the color of storm water, and whose life moved by appointment. This morning, his assistant walked beside him rehearsing a litany. Call the EAO, board chair at 9, review the acquisition at 10, meet council at 11. He nodded once, twice, a metronome of agreement, but his eyes kept flicking toward the atrium below, where the lobby unfurled like a quiet stage. He had seen the moment, or rather, he had caught the silence that followed it. That was what years, in rooms full of noise, had taught him. Listen for what stops sound. The little girl's voice had ridden the sunlight up to him. "Are you my new daddy?" 4 words that skated across glass and found the thin places in a man's armor. "Sir?" his assistant asked. He did not answer. His gaze had fixed on the janitor, now moving like a shadow in the bright. For a heartbeat, memory slammed him against himself. A different lobby, a different small hand in his, a different little voice once asking different impossible questions. "Why is the sky sad, Daddy? Will Mommy be back in time for my show?" And silence in answer, because grief is tar and tongues drown in it. The elevator doors closed on his reflection. He was not a man who cried where anyone could see. He was, however, a man who recognized the tremor in another's jaw, the white line of a scar, the deliberate gentleness of someone who has learned that strength used softly is a kind of holiness. He did not yet know why the lobby felt like a crossroads. He only knew he despised crossroads. They asked you to choose, and choice had cost him before. In the lobby, Lucy's mother reappeared. Olivia moved with the purpose of someone who stands in too many rooms where one wrong sentence can set the floor on fire. She thanked Harold with a smile that reached her lips and nowhere else. As she took Lucy's hand, the little girl leaned toward her, voice bubbling. "Mommy, I found the man." "What man, sweetheart?" "The one who makes pancakes." Lucy's certainty was a lantern. Olivia half laughed. "At the office? He's quiet, but he's kind. He helped people. He listens." Lucy nodded toward the far hall, but the janitor was gone, as if the floor had folded and let him through. "Strangers are still strangers," Olivia said, the lesson and the prayer layered together. "You can watch kindness from far away. That's safe." "Is it?" Lucy asked, not defiant, simply curious. Children collect truths and test them in sunlight. Sometimes you have to go close to see if it's real. They crossed the lobby. The elevator opened like a mouth and swallowed them. When the doors sealed, the janitor stepped out from a side corridor, a small square of paper now taped to the metal of a utility locker at knee height, exactly where a child might notice it. He pressed his palm against the locker's cool skin, not to bless it, not to pray, but to steady himself. Then he adjusted the cart, collected the mop, and set about making the morning look untouched again. He had once been another man, someone who lived inside chalk dust and novels, who graded essays with red pen and patience, who learned lullabies by heart because a baby's ear recognizes love in repetition. Then fire came through a wire in the wall one winter night and took his voice with the smoke. From that night forward, he carried his words in a pocket and let his hands speak for him. The world likes louder stories, so he learned how to vanish in plain sight. And then a child's question, simple, wild, unafraid, opened a door he had long ago bricked up. He did not believe in bargains with heaven. He did not believe in signs. He believed in floors and the way they forgive you each morning if you treat them well. He believed in sweeping a path so others would not slip. Yet as he returned to the strip of sun by the windows, he allowed himself one treasonous thought. What if this is not an accident? What if the smallest person in the room has better aim than sorrow? At the reception desk, Harold pretended to read a memo and instead watched the janitor, the elevator, the high-glass eyes of the man on the 43rd floor. He was old enough to know when threads are being pulled tight between strangers. He cleared his throat and said to no one in particular, "Sometimes the heart just needs a reason." No one answered. The building kept breathing. Around noon, when the sun had shifted and the marble glowed like a shell, a tiny envelope appeared in the slit of the janitor's locker. It was made from notebook paper, edges uneven, sealed with a sticker shaped like a star. On the front, in pencil pressed hard enough to leave grooves, 3 letters tried to stand straight. MRM. He rested his fingers on it before he lifted. It free, the way you rest your hand on the back of a chair before sitting, making sure it will hold. The lobby moved on. Phones rang. Deals were made. People hurried past the place where a quiet man stood very still with a paper star in his pocket and a child's hope thrumming like a second pulse in his wrists. Somewhere high above, a CEO stared at a calendar filling itself and felt for reasons he could not yet name, as if the day had just stopped being ordinary. The next morning, Lucy bounded into the building with a skip in her step, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Olivia followed more slowly, weighed down by folders and the careful armor of a professional smile. Harold tipped his hat from behind the desk, and Lucy waved as though greeting an old friend. She did not wait for instructions. With the confidence of someone who already had a secret appointment, Lucy darted toward the hallway where the janitor worked. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, and sure enough, there he was, pushing his cart, his shoulders slightly hunched, sleeves rolled up, his movements precise but unhurried. Lucy's face lit up. "Mr. M," she called out, using the name she had written on the envelope. Marcus, because that was his name, though few bothered to use it, paused, startled, as though hearing a nickname he hadn't known belonged to him. He turned, eyes warm but questioning. Lucy pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack and thrust it forward with both hands. "I wrote you another letter," she said proudly. "Did you read the first one?" He nodded once, slowly, and tucked the paper gently into his chest pocket as though it were fragile glass. Then he pulled out his notebook and scribbled carefully. "Letters are treasures. Thank you for trusting me with them." He tore out the page, bent down, and handed it to her. Lucy grinned. "Mommy says strangers are strangers, but I think sometimes people are friends before they even talk." Marcus didn't respond with words, but his eyes softened, and Lucy, who was still young enough to measure truth by the way someone looked at her instead of what they said, smiled wider. Olivia's heels clicked against the floor behind them. "Lucy," she said, her tone firm, "what did I tell you about wandering off?" Lucy froze, guilty. "I was just showing Mr. M my letter." Olivia's gaze snapped to the janitor. He stood still, calm, offering nothing but a quiet nod. There was no defensiveness, no attempt at charm. He simply acknowledged her. Respectful, present. For reasons she didn't want to examine, that unnerved her more than excuses would have. "Come on, sweetheart," she said tightly, taking Lucy's hand. "We'll be late." Lucy sighed, but as Olivia pulled her away, she whispered over her shoulder, "Don't forget to write back." Marcus stood watching them disappear around the corner, his hand unconsciously pressing against the pocket where her letter rested. That evening, Olivia sat at the kitchen table after Lucy had gone to bed. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. She unfolded Lucy's drawings and letters scattered across the table. Some were simple, stick figures with sunny skies, uneven hearts, but others stopped her. A picture of herself with tired eyes, Lucy holding her hand, and beside them, a tall man with kind eyes drawn in shaky crayon. "New Daddy," Lucy had written above it in crooked letters. Olivia's chest tightened. She had buried thoughts of Lucy's father so deep she almost convinced herself Lucy didn't need to ask. But children sense voids even when you name them something else. The idea that her daughter had chosen the janitor, of all people, to fill that void unsettled her. He was kind, yes, but kindness could be dangerous when attached to the wrong story. The next day at work, Olivia lingered after a meeting, her eyes drawn to the hallway she had promised herself to ignore. Marcus was there, wiping down a spill near the vending machines. He bent to help an older employee whose bag had split, gathering fruit that had rolled across the tiles. He didn't smile or expect thanks, but the way he carried the load was deliberate, patient. Olivia stood watching longer than she intended until someone cleared their throat nearby. She flushed and hurried back toward her office. Upstairs in a glass-walled boardroom, Richard Whitmore stood at the head of the table, speaking about mergers and projections. His voice was even, his gestures sharp, his presence filling the room, as always. And yet, as charts flickered across the screen, his mind wasn't on numbers. It was in the lobby, hearing a child's innocent question echo again. "Are you my new daddy?" He hadn't slept well since. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his own daughter, gone years now, asking impossible questions. He had answered with silence back then because grief had stolen every language he knew. That silence had cost him more than he admitted. Now, watching his employees file out of the room, Richard lingered by the window, gazing down into the atrium. His eyes found the janitor again, steady in his work, invisible to almost everyone. But Richard saw something in him, the same restraint, the same grief-weighted quiet he had once carried like armor. And he couldn't stop wondering, why had Lucy chosen him? Later that week, Olivia found a folded slip of paper in Lucy's backpack. At first, she assumed it was another of her daughter's scribbles. But when she opened it, she froze. Even when days are gray, you are someone's sunshine. Your mother's smile is waiting to find you again. Keep being brave. The storm broke on a Thursday afternoon. The building hummed with its usual noise. Phones ringing, keyboards clattering, muffled conversations spilling through glass walls. But underneath it all, tension simmered. Word had spread in whispers. The CEO himself had taken an interest in the janitor. Nobody knew why. Nobody dared ask. Lucy arrived with Olivia after school hours, skipping lightly across the polished lobby floor as if it belonged to her. Olivia was weary from meetings, her shoulders tight, her smile brittle. She signed documents at the reception desk while Lucy tugged her hand free and scampered toward the now familiar hallway. And there he was, as always. Marcus. The mop stood leaning against his cart, but for once he wasn't working. He was bent, over his notebook, writing slowly, each line carved with deliberation. When he noticed Lucy, he straightened, slipping the paper into his pocket as though it were something private. Lucy grinned. "Did you write me another one?" she asked eagerly. Hesitated, then nodded. His hand hovered near his pocket, but something stopped him. He glanced toward Olivia, who had just noticed them and was walking over, her heels clicking like small hammers on marble. "Lucy," Olivia said sharply, pulling her daughter close. "How many times must I tell you not to bother people while they work?" Lucy pouted. "But he's not bothered. He listens. Enough." Olivia's voice trembled with more than irritation. She looked at Marcus, her eyes a storm of confusion, frustration, and an ache she didn't want to admit. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this can't continue." Marcus lowered his gaze. He reached for his mop as though retreating into the only role he was allowed. But before either of them could speak again, a new voice cut through the lobby. Perhaps it should continue. The room stilled. Richard Whitmore strode forward, his presence as commanding as a shadow cast by lightning. His suit was immaculate, his jaw set, his eyes unreadable as they fixed on the janitor. Conversations faltered. The receptionist pretended to shuffle papers but leaned forward, listening. Even Harold straightened at his desk. Olivia stiffened. "Mr. Whitmore, Richard held up a hand. "Miss Bennett, this isn't about you. Not entirely." His eyes flicked to Lucy, then to Marcus. "But I think we all deserve the truth." Lucy blinked, sensing the weight in his tone. She stepped closer to Marcus, slipping her small hand into his without hesitation. The gesture was so natural, so instinctive, that it stole the air from the lobby. Richard's voice dropped lower, rougher. That question she asked the other day, the one that silenced this entire building. I haven't stopped hearing it. "Are you my new daddy?" He paused, swallowing something thick in his throat. "Why would she ask you?" Olivia's lips parted, then closed. Her grip on Lucy's shoulder tightened. Marcus's hand trembled in the child's, but he didn't let go. His eyes, dark and haunted, rose slowly to meet Richard's. He didn't have a voice to give, but in that moment, silence spoke more than words. Olivia's breath shook. She looked at Richard, then at Marcus, and finally let the truth bleed out. Because her father left before she could even remember him. Because she's been carrying an emptiness I can't fill. And because she saw in him. She nodded towards Marcus, something she's been longing for all her life. Kindness, presence, a man who listens. The admission cracked something open in her. She blinked back tears. I didn't ask for this. I didn't plan it. But she chose him before I even knew his name. The silence afterward felt holy, like a church before the hymn begins. Richard exhaled slowly, his composure unraveling. "Do you know," he said softly, "what it's like to lose a child? To hear questions you can't answer, to be crushed. Under the weight of silence you never wanted?" His eyes glistened just for a second before he blinked it away. "I do. And I recognize it in you. His gaze locked on Marcus. You've lost too, haven't you? Marcus's throat tightened. His scar gleamed under the lights. Slowly, he pulled his notebook from his pocket, tore out a page, and held it out. Richard hesitated before taking it. He unfolded the paper. Once I had a wife and daughter. A fire took them. I tried to save them. I saved no one. Smoke took my voice, grief took the rest. But your building gave me silence, until he had underlined the last word, until she asked if I could be her father. I don't know if I can, but I know I wanted to say yes. Richard's jaw tightened as he read. His chest rose sharply, then fell. He passed the note to Olivia with trembling fingers. She read it, tears spilling freely now. Lucy clutched Marcus's hand tighter. I told you, she whispered to her mother. He's the one. Richard turned away, striding a few steps as though distance could steady him. But when he faced them again, his mask had cracked. His voice trembled with something raw. You may not be her father by blood, but maybe, he said slowly. You don't need to be. The words rang through the lobby like a bell. Olivia pressed her hand over her mouth, overwhelmed. Marcus stood rooted, unable to move, unable to speak, but the tears in his eyes spoke enough. Lucy looked from one adult to another, sensing without understanding the enormity of what had just passed between them. Richard stepped closer, his voice steadier now. This company values profits, records, reputations, but maybe what it needs is a reminder of something else. Maybe I need it. He looked at Marcus with a rare softness. Don't hide behind that mop anymore. You've already changed more lives here than I have with all my speeches. For a moment, the three adults stood bound by a thread invisible but unbreakable. The janitor who had lost everything, the mother who carried too much alone, the CEO who had buried grief under steel and glass, and between them a child, innocent, insistent, who had forced open the silence with one impossible question. Lucy tugged on Marcus's sleeve again, her voice small but sure. So, are you? Marcus knelt slowly, meeting her eyes. His hand trembled as he reached for his notebook. He wrote carefully, then showed her. I don't know if I'm your new daddy, but I promise I will never stop trying to make you and your mommy smile. Lucy's face broke into a smile so wide it filled the room. She flung her arms around his neck, holding tight. Olivia's tears fell freely as she knelt beside them, resting a trembling hand on Marcus's shoulder. Richard turned away, blinking hard, his chest heaving. For the first time in years, he allowed himself a tear. He whispered, just loud enough to hear himself, maybe there's still hope. And in that lobby of glass and marble, something shifted. Not the stock prices or the balance sheets, but something heavier, more sacred. A man found his voice in silence. A woman found she didn't have to carry the weight alone. A child found her dream walking in flesh and bone. And the CEO, who had thought he'd buried love forever, found himself remembering that even broken, people could build something whole again, if they were brave enough to stay when the question was asked.